Hello, I am Charles Reagan Swindoll, and I am the author of Elucidating Christianity. I'm going to be reading to you my book today. Thank you for joining me. Elucidating Christianity, A Heretic's Descent, Triangulating Dysfunctional Religion, by Charles Reagan Swindoll. This world, with all its ills, with all its horrors, with all its sorrows, with all its stupidities, is the Golden Lotus world right now, as it is. And if you cannot see it as such, this is not the world's fault. What must be corrected is not the world, but one's perspective of it. Dr. Joseph Campbell. Dedication. My father loved me without condition my entire life. He reached for me and made great effort to connect with me when I was a boy, and continued to do so on into my adulthood. I was a difficult, opinionated, obnoxious, stubborn kid, and my father was patient and never yelled at me despite my often anarchic attitude. He loved my mother with all his heart, and he was a shining example to me of true love my entire life. His example served me for now going into 30 years of my marriage, and it continues to serve me every day. Always an advocate of my work and talents, and always encouraging me to pursue my own path, my father never tried to make me something I was not. He supported my dreams and believed in me without reservation. Few men can say these things of their father, but I proudly can of mine. Dad, it is with undying gratitude and emotion and love that I dedicate my book to you. I love you always and forever. Chuck. Acknowledgement. A warm and heartfelt thanks to my editor, Sarah Sakoa, who hand-sharpened Elucidating Christianity's points while polishing luster into its delivery. Thank you, Sarah, for your editing prowess, for caring so deeply about my book, and for your assistance bringing Elucidating Christianity to publication. Your scrutiny has transformed what was murky into clarity, and I am eternally grateful. Elucidating Christianity is a better book because of you, Sarah. Thank you sincerely. Preface. This book has been a joy, a challenge, a gift. I am so grateful for the opportunity to share my mind with you, and I do promise I will not waste your time. Please do not perceive my sharpness to be arrogance or righteous indignation. On the contrary, it is simply an experienced perspective that my life has afforded me after 40 years of giving myself completely and unequivocally to Christianity. This book unapologetically prods areas where a Christian is not typically penetrated, and yes, it hurts, but holes are where the light shines through. That said, it does not make my opinion about the religion any more right than any other bloke's, so take the book for the parts it's worth and toss the rest. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything, because I know I cannot. We only listen to ourselves, and so I am here to simply present perspectives and opinions about Christianity that each reader can consider in their own way. I am not claiming rightness, I am claiming reason. Christianity is a hard nut to crack because it hides behind huge veils of sin, grace, exclusivity, eternal security, and conditional love, and these distort our perspective lens which gazes reality. In my experience, once our perspective is cleansed, we cannot unsee what is seen. Satori is real. This book, then, is an attempt to dissolve the perspective of the Christian. It is my responsibility, then, to act as a heretical solvent which cleanses lenses of belief so that the Christian circumstance is rendered smudge-free. Section 1. Setting a foundation. A beginning is a very delicate time. Will you walk into my parlor? Said the spider to the fly. M. Howitt. Years ago I was listening to an Alan Watts lecture where he talks about God in an apophatic sense, which is to say, he describes God by negation, or by what God is not. It's a concept that fits nicely with the Zen idea of unlearning, or the alchemical idea of calcination, to burn away assumptions so that new insight can be integrated. Cataphatic language is the opposite of apophatic, meaning cataphatic language would be to describe God by attachment, which means to describe God by what God is. Cataphatic fits nicely with the theological idea of learning God through accumulation. So to recap, the apophatic way of understanding God is by removing, and the cataphatic way is by affixing. Which path naturally leads to transparency? I had never thought about this before, and it startled me when I considered the implications. Watts illustrates the apophatic emphasis by using the mental imagery of a marble sculptor who skillfully removes material to render the form hidden inside the block. The artist knows the skill of removing the explicit to render the implicit, because art engenders the blind to see. Such is the Christian condition, and therefore the motivation of this book. We are beings composed of truth, and so pass skin, concepts, words, objects, time, space, ego, and all attachments. The truth, or identity of what we are, is discovered not by affixing more and more ideas to ourselves, but by removing those assumptions. This gives rise to the Buddhist idea of klesha. Klesha is debris in the mind such as ignorance, egoism, attachment, aversion, and fear, which keep an individual from seeing the truth that they are. A transparent mind, or a mind free of klesha, is able to lucidly see the patterns nature leaves in the wake of experience. Every convert, then, must graduate past assumed separations that limit ability to see past oneself. I'm going to talk about Christianity in such a way I doubt you have ever heard or considered. That is not a threat. It is an invitation. Certainly there are conceptual components from others I have used to substantiate the theories I present, but the summation of them is my own. My concepts of Christianity are original, organic, and of course, my opinion. Take them with grains of salt. I certainly do not consider my opinions as right, but rather as experienced and convicting. Everyone finds their own understanding of truth, and this book is just another opinion about it, not a pontificator of it. My considerations have come about through the release of biblical core assumptions and conclusions about oneself and God that are programmed into every Christian like any operating system on a computer. So in a very real sense, this book is bold-faced heresy. It unapologetically suggests the reader doubt by putting Christianity into traction. Behavioral psychology and human development liberate a Christian from cataphatic theology, like an inversion table liberates a spine. The psychological scrutiny of sin and atonement renders Christianity's paralyzing contradictions and interminable self-conflict. This then calls to the table the validity of a religion which has commandeered the minds of millions for over 2,000 years. As a culture transitioning through the Great Awakening, we are graduating past the short-sightedness required to believe in 2,000-year-old, maladaptive, spiritual assumptions. The earth is not a fallen creation. Humans are not born spiritually dead, and God is not a religiously accessed and exclusive being. Beliefs which facilitate a dominator-oriented spiritual posture condition love from a patriarchal God, and the sacrifice of an unblemished innocent have become cultural abominations no different than slavery in the 16th century or stake-burning witches in the 12th. We will consider together aspects of Christianity that are not criticized because they have been assumed normal or simply the way it must be. As a result, the actual psychology of the religion has escaped critical examination because nobody sends the king to a shrink. Christianity is the undisputed king of all Western religions, claiming about 70% of all U.S. citizens today. Google, Wikipedia, Gallup. I want nothing less than liberation for every reader, and liberation does not come through following someone else or through belief in anything. My hope is that you see the light I shine on the spiritual landscape, consider it, and then be on your way. It's the same healing philosophy any compassionate doctor or psychologist would employ, that every sick patient heals completely and goes on their way, sustaining their health independently. Dependence does not lead to liberation, it leads to lack. The idea of this book, then, is to liberate every reader from assumed dependency so we all can escape religious bondage. Spirituality approached from religious craft is a technique within reality, not reality itself. So there'll be no need to subscribe to any preconditioned belief or perform any kind of spiritual gymnastics to understand what is rendered in the coming pages. This thesis has been written with the simple idea of exonerating humanness. That's you, that's me. We do this by abiding with nature, not condemning it. We do this by observing reality multidimensionally, not dualistically. We do this by knowing ourselves through experience, not others' opinions. There are no assignments in this book. There is no homework to get done, nothing to memorize, no steps to follow, no workbooks to fill out, nor goals to meet, thank God. Rather, this book opens a dialogue based on common sense, consequence, natural human development, and psychology. These larger perspectives lead to awareness and individuation, which are experientially recognized, not taught through words. Self-awareness and development are assets of opportunity which all humans readily carry, and so are the psychological undergirding and thrust of this book. We all as adults must uneducate or unlearn ourselves from childhood assumptions that were lovingly taught to us when we had no discernment or experience to develop a reasonable conclusion on our own. Conclusions were therefore instructed, not drawn. If we are ever going to take full ownership of our lives as adults, we must be willing to step out from the gaslit room, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc., we were placed into as children or vulnerable adults, and see clearly the ways we were taught to think, because those ways are not tantamount to the truth. An indoctrinated reality keeps us in the ways our parents, or pastors, or professors assumed life, but that has nothing to do with actual reality, because truth is larger than an instructed, gaslit reality. This book points to a distant shore far from the sheltered waters of the Christian's theological island. Every Christian must gird the courage to break down walls of mental limits and fearlessly sail into the ocean of greater awareness if they wish to liberate themselves. Thankfully, each of us finds out the truth for ourselves, and since nature is artistic in many ways, each person will experience a unique rendering. Truth must be considered from multiple viewpoints in order to find understanding, because it is past one perspective. All dewdrops on the spider's web reflect the other and the world uniquely, while simultaneously pointing to the same now. I am subject to the same truth just as everyone else, but my experience of it is unique. Meaning, this book contains opinions, not ultimate truth. Truth is past words, and so we discover it through experiences of which this book is simply another. I come from a multi-generational Christian family and was raised saturated in the church. My grandparents on both sides were fully committed Christians. I think their parents were also Christians. That made me at least a fourth-generation Christian. But this is not unusual in Christian circles. In fact, it's the norm. A child which is a living sponge for information will gravitate towards whatever religion to which the family already adheres, and every child loves to please their parents. So Christianity becomes the only world a child experiences in an indoctrinated Christian family, because it is the only reality that the family's leadership, namely the parents, will allow. In the case of all adolescent converts, age 4 to about 12, Christianity becomes the only reality which that child can accept, as they are taught to reject all other non-Christian spiritual considerations. This is why lifelong Christians are locked in a Plato's cave situation and blind to any universe that contains no Messiah. Most psychologists would agree. We become just like our parents, since parents influence us during the most formative prepubescent years. The parentally influenced Christian way of thinking is integrated as the child grows into a young teen, and in many cases, this carries right on into adulthood, totally unchallenged. Multi-generational Christianity is typical, because most Christian families stay in the belief system for life. Parents indoctrinate all their children as youngsters long before discernment has enough experience to develop, because Christianity is far more than a religion, it is a whole life methodology. This is the very definition of indoctrination. So most every Western child gets entangled in Western spiritual assumptions at the natal level. Children from Christian parents, like their grandparents before them, only know a world exclusively composed of and by sin and atonement. No other world can be integrated, as all other spiritual assumptions are, from the indoctrinated Christian perspective, grotesque. As emphasized earlier, to engender sight to the blind is the motivation of this book. So Christianity runs very strong in my family, and as far as I know, I am the only Swindoll currently alive who has totally abandoned the belief system. That said, I spent nearly 40 years deeply entrenched within it. In fact, from age 6 to age 19, I lived in a household where a Christian broadcasting radio ministry began from a shoebox of letters under my mother's bed. It was a box of letters requesting my father's Sunday sermons be broadcast over the airwaves so that everyone could hear his talks. A ministry from the requests in those letters was developed and became a globe-girdling Christian radio broadcasting empire that grew to reach just under half the world's population in 16 languages in over 150 countries. The president and founder and the executive chairman of this company are my parents. From age 28 to 43, I served at a church in a salaried position, participating in weekly ministry where the motivation was nothing but the exoneration and promulgation of Jesus Christ. This was delivered exclusively through conservative evangelical Christian core values, traditions, and assumptions. Everything I know about Christianity, I learned through real-life experience in the trenches, while under the watchful tutelage of my father, arguably the largest Christian voice the world has ever seen, save for Billy Graham. So I did not learn what I know about Christianity from a book or a worn-out college professor. I, in fact, lived and served the religion over the course of 4 decades. My father was and still is a conservative Christian pastor. He and my mother truly love Jesus, and it breaks their heart I have left the system. We to this day have not discussed it. My choice has alienated our relationship, and this is unavoidable since Christianity is far more than a system of beliefs. It is a very specific and measured way of thinking. My parents have dedicated their entire life, vocation, even vacations, to Christianity. Both of them are genuine, hard-working, good people doing their best to be an influence in the world that is positive. They truly believe that is what they are doing because every convert assumes the Christian spiritual ethos is the correct and best one. My folks have always been supportive of my work and always encouraged me to pursue my dreams. But make no mistake, they want nothing to do with this book. Regardless, I love both my parents dearly and do not care if they reject this book as heretical gobbledygook. I am eternally grateful to them and their support. I emphasize my parents' dedication to Christ and my unending love for them to render how deeply my indoctrination was in Christianity, not to highlight contention. It is critical for everyone who reads this book to understand this, or my assimilations will never carry any merit. I want to make it clear this book is not a retaliation. There is neither an axe being ground, nor a vendetta being served. Opinions shared in this book are not born of scorn or anger. They are born of experience and psychology. I want there to be no misunderstanding about this. I do not hate Christianity, nor any religion for that matter. I see Western religions like Eastern spiritual systems, novelties ghosting a much larger reality. I dislike the self-identity crisis and spiritual self-righteousness Christianity causes in its converts, but I have no issue with its ideas of loving one another and fostering compassion. It is the self-conflict and developmental stagnation which go hand in hand with a sin and atonement spiritual narrative that are my central contentions with Christianity, and this I describe in excruciating detail within this book. There is repetition, layering, and describing of Christian and psychological concepts throughout the book, because Christianity always leads to the same lengths of separation, conflict, unawareness, and frustrated development. Eventually, no matter which stream of thought approaches the religion, it guides the mind to the same settings of concepts, assumptions, and conclusions. Western spiritual systems work this way because the idea is to keep every member gaslit with the spiritual conundrums that serve, support, and supplement the system, not decommission, disassemble, and dissolve it. I was born in 1970 and became a Christian in 1974. My sister, Colleen, age 7, led me to Christ. We were downstairs playing together. We have always gotten along swell, and somehow a conversation about Jesus came up. She basically let me know that everyone is born sinful, and sin keeps us from having relationship with God, because God cannot look upon sin. Habakkuk 1:13. To pay the price of sin, God sent His only Son, Jesus, to the earth to die for everyone, so those who accept Jesus into their heart could be with God forever in heaven. John 3:16. People that do not accept Jesus, well, God abandons them, and they go to hell forever. Revelation 20:15. Those were the basics we discussed, and I committed my life to Jesus right then and there. Most any child growing up in a Christian family will have similar stories of conversion at a tender age, because the religion becomes like a birthright passed from one family member to another. Wanting to be part of whatever the family participates in is attractive to any child, because kids want to please those around them. I mean, honestly, who wants to be a naysayer in the face of mom and dad's beliefs at age 4? Certainly not me. Mom and dad rule the world in the prepubescent years. Heck, I still remember my daughter Jessica at the age of 5 saying she wanted me to carry her to bed every night for life. I would tell her, Jessica, I am sure in a few years you will feel quite differently. She would endlessly deny that would ever happen, but just a few years later, she proved me right. There is a moment of elation every Christian experiences as they finish a conversion prayer, because they imagine they are saved from hell and are now part of the correct group. They have spiritually arrived at the correct answer. Nobody ever forgets when they become a Christian. Like your first job, first pet, first sexual encounter, first car, first apartment, first love. These events set deep in us because they are once in a lifetime. The moment one accepts Jesus as their Savior carries no less weight. Being saved from eternal hell feels incredibly good, because hell is as powerful as the imagination affords, and our imaginations are limitless. Point 1. The spiritual world is an etheric art, and so to find spiritual companionship with other like-minded members is an extremely gratifying asset most every Christian enjoys. The feeling of companionship with others, with God, with a group boasting hundreds of millions of members spanning thousands of years, is overwhelmingly powerful and influencing. Christians take pride in their membership, just like the military carries pride within its members. There is nothing wrong with that, but it can be blinding when everyone of influence offers the same core perspectives. That should be a sobering thought for every Christian, because nobody learns anything new in an echo chamber. Humans enjoy camaraderie, kinship, and being a part of an exclusive group. And since Christianity is an extremely exclusive spiritual membership, the elated feeling of entering into that circle of trust is never forgotten or taken lightly. This is yet another reason it becomes so hard to leave Christianity, because abandonment of it means loss of membership, and often the camaraderie and kinship one shared with those closest in life. Since all intimate relationships in Christianity spiritually center around Jesus, when one member of the relationship abandons the Christian's exclusive spiritual arrangement, it is indeed devastating. It becomes like attempting to sustain a long-distance relationship without the authentic intimacy of physical presence. Many believers see relationships as, quote-unquote, unequally yoked, 2 Corinthians 6:4, when one partner is not on the same religious bender. This often includes business, and has happened to me personally, as abandonment of the religion cost me my job, my financial security, and basically all the relationships I developed over the course of my life. I have a different relationship with everyone I knew before I left Christianity, because a sense of betrayal naturally goes along with leaving a group that offers no exit strategy. Yet, in the moments leading up to conversion, none of these unfortunate side effects ever enter the convert's mind, because accepting Jesus is assumed the only correct option. We dive into religion without realizing what we are psychologically doing to ourselves, especially as children. The Christian spiritual assumptions will never be abandoned as an adult, because every Christian believes they know they are right without realizing what belief in sin causes or what conversion implicates. The Christian has no idea the counter-developmental rat's nest they inherit, committing to a life identifying as a sinner. The high of spiritual correctness blinds every convert from the psychological and behavioral consequences of committing to a belief system which is exclusive and therefore conditional, intolerant and therefore stagnant, and imperialistic and therefore egocentric. I was born in mid-1970 in Dallas, Texas. My father took a pastorate at a church in Fullerton, California in early 1971. So my first steps were not in Texas, they landed on the drive to California, literally. All my childhood memories reside in the suburbs of Fullerton, Brea, La Habra, Whittier, La Mirada, Anaheim, Santa Ana, Huntington, and Newport Beaches. I consider myself a Californian as that's the only state I knew from age 7 months until 20 years. I lived at the same house on Tamarack Drive in Fullerton, California from spring of 1971 till fall of 1989, when I moved to Summerlin, California to live with some college friends as I tried to figure out my life. I really hated elementary school, junior high, and high school because I don't test well and have a selective memory. So by about age 13, I knew I was never going to voluntarily serve another 4 years in an educational detention center. I have never been a power-hungry, greedy person or been taken with status or educational degrees. So the idea of volunteering myself to another 4 years of classrooms, burnout professors, impossible tests, and endless homework was ridiculous to me. Earning more money, status, power, and accomplishment from a corrupt system making someone else's dreams come true was a future I did not want and did not motivate me. As a result, post-high school was a sketchy time because this world does not cater to those that do not subscribe to its established systems of education and income. Yet, had I betrayed my heart and given myself to the system, I am positive this book would have never been written. I would have died a degreed, squared, self-ignorant, good Christian boy, prostrate in a reality taught to me and therefore unfit for a larger awareness. I attended all the activities any kid growing up in a church experiences. Vacation Bible school, 2 services every Sunday, church summer camp, Forest Home, and Mount Hermon for me. Wednesday night church, Tuesday night Bible studies at the core group leader's house, amusement park days with church groups all dressed in identical shirts, children's choir, Christmas and Easter pageantry, mission trips to help the poor, door-to-door evangelizing. I even attended a Christian school so crispy crunchy they didn't bother to teach evolution. Without any doubt, I was fully baptized in the whole Christian kit and caboodle. I was an all-in, dyed-to-the-wool, Jesus forever Christian. Fortunately, I didn't have any issues with sexual predation or any of the sexual exploitation that often goes on in churches. Churches attract parents who must willingly turn over their kids to strangers for many hours each Sunday morning. This unfortunately makes Sunday school a haven for pedophiles who know how to take advantage of a church and the trust it assumes between members. It is indeed a tragic situation, as many pedophiles are willing to groom adult relationships over many years to access those same adults' children down the road. Sex abuse in church is almost unavoidable considering the amount of children churches attract, and all but the top echelon of children's ministries is sustained with volunteer help. Volunteers come and go as people live their lives and attend many churches, which makes it difficult to cull volunteer help. Paid staff is often underpaid and overworked since most churches run shoestring budgets. All of these kinds of details add up to an unintentionally risky situation for kids. Honestly, no church wants this situation. It simply is the way it has developed over time. I am one of the few who unbelievably escaped sex abuse in the home, school, and church, and I know that is an exception to the rule, especially since I grew up during the satanic heydays of the 70s. I do believe I was the target of an Anton LaVey hunt, but that story is for another time and place. I mention all this to make clear. This book is not my public washing of emotional trauma or sex abuse revenge. A decade ago, I was working at a church in Texas. I sat down with a pastor, and we had a long conversation about a number of challenges I present in this book. Challenges, which at that time were just blossoming in my mind. This person was trained in psychology, so the behavioral language I was using from my own years in counseling, they well understood. In the discussion, my contention was not with Christian history, or the validity of the Bible, or if Jesus existed. It was simply posing the question, what happens to a person when their belief system is built on a platform of fear? Sin is a form of fear. So after speaking with this pastor for a while, they finally raised their hands in frustration and exclaimed, "I wish I had never started this conversation with you, because now I am questioning everything I believe." We never did talk about any of it again the remaining years I worked there, but every time I saw them it was different, and the conversation somehow changed our relationship. I feel badly for pastors because if they leave Christianity, they lose their job, and with it their livelihood, some even their residence if the church provides it. I offer that memory as a provocative warning to any devout Christian embarking upon the journey of reading this book, because it points out the psychologies which undergird the foundations of the religion, and what is implicated is not easy to digest. The book is very matter-of-fact, so it is contentious to Christianity by default, because the book exposes peace at any price, and the ends justifies the means, as inadequate conclusions. The book does not attempt to answer questions about Christianity, it points to them. This book contains no conclusions or illusions such as, "Now I finally know," or "Now I have the spiritual answer." Rather, the book will begin a dialogue about what is assumed in Christianity, and how to dispel its psychological contradictions by seeing those assumptions clearly. Transparency exposes contradiction. In this way, then, the book is a thought-instigating and refining machine. It is designed to ruffle feathers because how else does anything change? If an artist wants to sharpen their skills, they hire a confident, experienced, and honest coach who will fearlessly speak the truth without concern of what the student thinks about it. Ask any elite dancer or musician. We learn under the toughest instructors because they speak a truth we refuse to look at or are blind to. Furthermore, we learn under adversity, critique, and pressure, not echo chambers, ease, or entitlement. This gives substance to why nature is merciless. In the same vein of thought, then, the book offers horrifying vantages of Christianity, so as to elicit growth, not to stir anger. My perspectives took years to spot, consider, accept, and integrate, so do not be frustrated if at first my thesis cannot be seen clearly. In fact, Real change takes extended time and pressure. So if a sentence causes the reader to throw the book on the floor in a moment of disgust, oh, that is very good indeed. Every rich sauce needs a spot of vinegar, just as our spiritual inclinations need a drizzle of heresy. It is hard to reconsider everything one has ever known, yet that seems to be the call to action as we get deeper and deeper into understanding ourselves as individuals and the universe as a whole. We are moving as a culture into a new eon of understanding, and right now is the launch of that moment. My book asks questions most Christians assume they answered long ago, because one of the major points in life is to keep questioning to discover more and more truth. The quest is endless, so the doubter has an advantage. The truth, the real truth, what we are, cannot be put into words. We ourselves are treasures, not sinners, and we discover this truth through experience because it cannot be informed. It was intentionally hidden from us with the psychology that goes with Christianity. We are pure love, and love is something realized, not instructed or chosen. Love cannot be tainted. This level of understanding cannot be passed on, inherited, or taught. We discover we are the treasure through our own unique characteristics, virtues, and gifts, which inform us of ourselves through participation. The only real truth we can ever know is what we personally experience. All else is bad translation. Alan Watts would often ask in his lectures impossible questions like, how does one touch the tip of their finger with the same finger? How can one bite their own teeth? How does one pull themselves off the ground with their own bootstraps? In other words, how do I see me and you see you? If we are ever going to get past ourselves, we must do the impossible, and that is to consider what we each are. How is that done when it is our own mind that informs us? We do it through triangulation. Triangulating human psychology and development with Christianity's demand for a sinner renders why a sin and atonement narrative is inappropriate, if development and appropriate behavior is the goal. We all are human. We all can understand some common characteristics between us fairly well. Love, greed, compassion, hate, joy, rage, laughter, jealousy, and so forth and so on. These undefinable characteristics offer a doorway into understanding Christianity because we identify with ourselves when experiencing them. It's hard to see ourselves objectively because we become blind to our own backyards. But seeing ourselves in others clarifies the situation. Psychology, then, allows us to triangulate Christianity with human characteristics, utilizing commonalities in such a way that we can see contradictions, and through that self-dialogue, then correct where our mind does not match reality. For example, say you go to a psychologist, and after a few months they reveal you are codependent with your partner. A behavior you knew how to do because you were already behaving as a codependent. But, and here's the key part, you were not aware that you were acting in a codependent way. The psychologist proceeds to demonstrate how they see codependency by triangulating recent codependent and enabling behaviors noted in the past month's counseling sessions. In that spontaneous moment of transparency, through the wise words of the counselor's keen triangulation, the codependency pattern is rendered. By seeing the codependency, it is dispelled. The psychologist disempowers the codependency by triangulating it with real-life experience. Even though you were acting in a codependent way, you were not aware of your behavior. So the inappropriate, harmful behavior persisted simply from a lack of self-awareness, not ill intent. Humans are usually blind to their own behaviors and assumptions because we are blind to our subconscious. The psychologist shines a spotlight in the subconscious, and this clarifies the situation. In other words, by shining a light upon the codependency hidden in the shadowy motivations of behavior, the psychologist offers an apophatic language of liberation for the client, a liberation through transparency with themselves, because only we can change ourselves. Like the sculptor removes the parts of the marble that are not the image, the psychologist exposes the behavior that is not humane. In the end, the artist can only point. It is we who must liberate ourselves, and leaving is just as difficult as discovering the exit. The moral of the story: it is one thing to merely understand that Christianity is a binocular view of reality, and it is entirely another thing to hang up the binoculars and walk away. In that sense, then, this book renders Christianity from a perspective that can be quite terrifying. It is in many ways like realizing drug addiction requires an addict, and finding out that oneself is the common denominator. Nobody likes to quit something that feels good any more than we like to quit a spiritual belief system that seems right. Both are painful and arduous processes, but if one is ever going to liberate themselves, they must be willing to let go of the assumptions which led them into the idea they needed to be liberated in the first place. The drug addict assumes they need a drug, while the sinner assumes they need salvation. But heroin and grace only serve to dilute liberation, not evoke it. Therein is the conundrum both the addict and the Christian must sort. This book is intended to be the beginning of a persistent dialogue, a dialogue not with me, but between the reader and their own mind. My intent is to act as a muse, whispering sweet heresies into the ear that evoke challenging thought. I'm not here to convince, fix, or talk anyone into anything. Honestly, I do not want to take on those responsibilities, because the only person who can convince ourselves of anything is ourselves. We cannot take full ownership of a life we do not develop ourselves, just like any self-respecting artist could never take ownership of a painting they did not paint. This is why self-awareness is so important. I am here to encourage doubt in the reader. Remember, it was Thomas the Doubter, alone amongst even the greatest of disciples, who was given permission to place his hand into the flesh of God. No other disciple then or since has been granted such privilege. Like Jesus and Martin Luther, Copernicus and Tesla, Galileo and Thomas, I am suggesting placing your head into the gestalt called doubt. God is past what is known, so it is the apophatic doubter who accesses God in the here and now. The truth can take any pressure. It does not matter from where the pressure comes. The real truth will hold. To that end, this book is a tool to provide a pressure called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when two antithetical concepts of equal veracity manifest in the mind at the same time. Both concepts are independently valid, but incongruent with each other. For example, the Christian claims the love of God requires no condition, but also claims a person must believe in Jesus, sin, and atonement to have a loving relationship with God. That is cognitive dissonance. Here is another. I cannot insist I am a sinner, whilst at the same time trust my own opinion that I am a sinner, because sinners cannot be trusted. The Christian knows they are a sinner, but also knows they must trust their own opinion if they are ever going to take full ownership of their life. See the dissonance going on? It is these prevailing kinds of counterintuitive assumptions in Christianity that present serious psychological concerns when triangulated with human motivation, behavior, and development. Cognitive dissonance, therefore, becomes an autoclave for Christianity. If Christianity is indeed the truth, it will take any pressure applied. Enter Elucidating Christianity. I am not a manipulating enemy attempting to turn the reader's world upside down. I am simply a fellow life sojourner sharing honestly what I have come to understand through many painful life catastrophes. It was catastrophe which brought about the most change in my perspective. My voice as a complete stranger may be more honest and easier to palate than if a closest friend made similar statements, because my distance offers the illusion of safety. My honesty may be painful, but it is a friend to the selfless. I do not pose to be right, I am attempting transparency. The more transparent and honest I can be, the more we can identify with each other, and therefore trust each other to have the best human interest in mind. That said, to conclude about Christianity as I have would be a disservice to your experience, because yours will be different than mine. I am not claiming to be right. Rather, I am affirming honest transparency. Do not follow me, as my way only leads to my understanding, not anyone else's. We each must take on the responsibility to find our own path that leads to our own fulfillment, because nobody truly wants understanding handed to them any more than they want to be loved, because another must. We merit awareness and find understanding through personal experience and risk, not another's opinions and conjecture. To that end, this book is simply the beginning of a continuing dialogue on the journey to self-discovery, from the vantage of what I observed along the way. A diverse perspective of an infinite universe is the only reasonable approach to clarity. Reason is acquired from many perspectives, and this is why the notion of one exclusive path to glory is in fact a spiritual straitjacket.